All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're basically looking at a forensic psychological report detailing the catastrophic collapse of society's moral architecture. What we're unpacking here is a fascinating yet honestly deeply unsettling case study of how a fragile legal system decays into a state of pure active nihilism. We're going to be analyzing the precise psychological roles of the id, the ego, and the superego, and observing how the toxic interplay between these three forces inevitably leads to the manifestation of a terrifying entity known as the Red Judge.
Here is our clinical roadmap for today. First, the Gilded Hollow. Second, the Mask of Virtue. Third, the Void Mirror. Fourth, the Red Judge emerges. Fifth, the Architecture of Retribution. And finally, the Mountain Path Prognosis.
Okay, part 1, the Gilded Hollow. This is our initial psychodynamic state. So, let's meet our first archetype. Setting the precarious psychological baseline for this Gothic fable, this is the High Judge. In clinical terms, you can think of him as the superego. He sits upon this high throne of established order and moral virtue. But if we take a closer forensic look, his authority is actually dangerously defensive. It's not spiritually elevating at all. He clutches his gavel in this rigid adherence to what the source material calls an illusion of value. So his legalism isn't designed to push humanity forward, it's rooted in a highly sterile desire for safety, essentially just acting as a protective measure for the weak.
Now, in stark contrast to the judge's high throne, right beneath the conscious floorboards of the psyche, we have our second figure, von Nixt, or the tarantula. This represents the id. Lurking in the damp dark, the tarantula is the primal source of a dark hunger for revenge. It is the literal, active embodiment of resentment. The tarantula utterly despises anyone who strives for greatness, verticality, or self-overcoming. Instead, it preaches what it calls the safety of the dust. And rounding out our psychodynamic triad is the jester. He represents the ego. But, and this is a huge but, it's a completely maladaptive ego. Instead of doing what a healthy ego should do, which is harmonizing the id and the superego, the jester acts as a nihilistic deconstructor. His mocking dance exposes the High Judge's symbols as hollow toys, which completely undermines the superego while at the exact same time feeding the tarantula's deep-seated resentment. He's basically a deadly catalyst for the total destruction of moral boundaries.
Moving to part 2, the Mask of Virtue, the weaponization of resentment.
This is the stage where the pathology really starts to progress, as the id begins to weaponize its deep envy against society, but it hides it under the guise of morality. Listen to this quote from the source Parables. Von Nietzsche asks, "Why do you persist in that vertical madness? Look at the web of equality I have spun. Here in the dust, no one is taller than their neighbor." Reading this with clinical precision, it's wild to see exactly how the tarantula disguises its venomous resentment as a noble societal piece. It literally pathologizes the human drive for greatness as vertical madness.
And this brilliantly illustrates the systematic breakdown of society's immune system. Step by step, we can watch the mechanics of this pathology unfold. First, moral shielding, using virtue to just hide envy. Second, enforced equality, which is a pathological drive to reduce absolutely everyone to the lowest common denominator. Third, linguistic weaponization, where the existential ache of becoming is rebranded as a dangerous pathology. And finally, stifling self-overcoming, which locks everyone into a state that is as flat and sterile as a tomb.
Right, on to part 3, the Void Mirror, the total collapse of the ego.
We've hit the acute crisis point of our case study, guys. This is the catastrophic moment of complete ego dissolution, and it's triggered by our maladaptive jester. To orchestrate this collapse, the jester stages an internal psychological play. He forces the High Judge, the superego, to look directly into an uncanny void mirror. This is a terrifying clinical confrontation. The mirror forcefully strips away all of the judge's moral justifications and his legalistic facades. He is left staring at his own unfiltered core.
And here is the terrifying twist. Those legalistic facades completely dissolved. The true architecture of the law is exposed as nothing more than a mask for decay. And the core truth is finally revealed. The judge realizes that his rigid desire for order is actually just the exact same purposeless burning desire to punish that drives the tarantula. The superego and the id share the exact same dark hunger.
Which brings us to part 4, the Red Judge emerges, a synthesis into active nihilism.
The void mirror shatters the old world. The illusion of value is gone, leading us straight into the terminal phase of this psychological pathology. With the facades stripped away, the inferno of nihilism ignites. The old symbols of authority literally dissolve into ash. What emerges from this psychological merger
is a clarifying synthesis. The superego's absolute authority fuses perfectly with the id's insatiable thirst for revenge, and this births the skeletal, monstrous entity we call the Red Judge. Law and pure retribution are now one and the same, existing purely for their own destructive sake.
Part 5. Architecture of Retribution. The Reign of Active Nihilism.
Let's look at the new rules of this collapsed psychic landscape where any notion of the mountain path of individual growth is completely thrown out the window. Notice the devastating transition in the instruments of law here. We move from the gavel, which sure was fragile and built on an illusion of value, but was still a tool of mediation, to the branding iron. The branding iron is the ultimate symbol of total active nihilism. It's a weapon that marks the world with permanent, silent scars, driven by nothing but a purposeless desire to punish. The system isn't about justice anymore. It's just a machine of pure revenge.
Finally, Part 6. The Mountain Path Prognosis. The Adaptive Ego. Luckily, this forensic report doesn't end in total despair. It actually concludes by offering a clinical, healthy alternative to this horrific monument to destruction. To find that alternative, we introduce our hero archetype, Das Wanderer. In our psychodynamic framework, Das Wanderer represents the adaptive ego. Unlike our jester, Das Wanderer is the creative architect of the self. This figure completely rejects the suffocating safety of the dust and the enforced equality of the tarantula. Instead, the adaptive ego takes that primal energy, literally sublimating the venom of envy, and channels it into self-transformation, embracing the glorious, challenging inequality of the mountain path.
I absolutely love this line from Das Wanderer because it injects such vibrant energy into our clinical study. I do not build to appease a judge. I build to transcend the very architecture of retribution that you call home. This perfectly showcases the pursuit of growth in absolute defiance of the Red Judge's active nihilism. It's the ultimate rejection of a system built purely on punishment.
If we put these two ego manifestations side by side, the contrast is just massive. The maladaptive jester is motivated by nothing but exposing the void and mocking order to achieve total nihilism. But the adaptive wanderer, they are driven by the ache of becoming. Das Wanderer sees the flawed order as something to surpass, using the fire of transformation to actually build something greater. The end goal isn't destruction, it's self-creation.
So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's that true justice is not found in retribution. It's found in the struggle to surpass one's own limitations through the fire of transformation. True justice requires the relentless scars of self-overcoming. It absolutely does not require the branding iron of revenge that the Red Judge wields.
Let's wrap up this explainer with a question for you to really chew on. When you examine your own internal architecture, your own id, ego, and superego, are you going to settle for the suffocating safety of the dust, hiding behind a mask of virtue? Or will you embrace the relentless, transformative scars of the mountain path? The choice between active nihilism and creative self-architecture is entirely up to you.